The sky is completely covered in black. Give me the volumes.
From East Palestine!
And this is one of the biggest disasters in American history, and the Biden administration does nothing but send money to Ukraine because it's a money laundering operation.
That's an issue. That's a major issue.
I feel like the train derailment happened. I feel like nobody cares for two reasons.
I thought that was a strange statement because...
Let's look that up.
Called me and said...
Okay, so these are all just lies. Okay, I mean, it's Trump, so of course, but okay. Oh my God, who's listening? If you work at Vice or anybody, oh my God, I have such a great idea. I wonder if we could do this as a platform.
An overheated wheel bearing that was 253 degrees hotter than the air temperature. That set off a sensor and audible warnings on the Norfolk Southern train. But the temperature did not reach a level that would have required the crew to stop the train by the company's own rules until just before the accident.
The warning threshold is set by railroads, and again, it varies by railroad. We're going to look at that and see if that threshold should change.
Jennifer Homendy is chair of the NTSB.
I will tell you that had there been a detector earlier, it would not have, that derailment may not have occurred.
The 149-car train derailed nearly 3 weeks ago. Its 38 cars came off the tracks, 11 of them tank cars that dumped more than 100,000 gallons of hazardous chemicals, including vinyl chloride, which is linked to cancer. The EPA says its tests...
What does that mean? Linked to cancer. I'm from California. Well, I'm not from California. I'm sorry. I lived in California for 3 years. I've seen enough signs to know that everything is linked to cancer, okay? Literally everything. In California, if you step in a fucking parking garage, there's like 27 signs saying, just so you know, if you come into this parking garage, if you have a fucking fetus, it's gonna fucking die. And if you're worried about cancer, you're gonna fucking get it. Or maybe just things are carcinogenic in California.
Show the air and municipal drinking water in East Palestine are safe. Today's NTSB report also found the train was traveling 47 miles per hour before the accident, which was below the speed limit. Residents in East Palestine remain anxious and frustrated about the aftermath, and they have questioned why Norfolk Southern and authorities opted for a controlled burn of the chemicals. In its preliminary report, the NTSB said that happened because the temperature in one of the tank cars was very high and could have led to a catastrophic explosion. The report was released as Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg was on the ground in East Palestine today. He said the accident showed the need for tougher regulation from Congress and higher safety protocols from the rail industry.
Norfolk Southern and the other freight rail companies need to stop fighting us every time we try to do a regulation.
He also acknowledged that he may have waited too long to travel there, saying he wanted to let the EPA and NTSB deal with the emergency first. The federal response has become a partisan flashpoint.
We have told you loud and clear you are not forgotten.
Yesterday, former President Donald Trump visited the area and blasted President Biden for not yet visiting East Palestine.
They heard I was coming. They all came. They weren't going to come. They were going to leave you abandoned, and now they're not.
Today, Buttigieg pushed back, arguing that the Trump administration eased up on safety regulations too easily to satisfy the railroad companies.
One thing he could do is express support for reversing the deregulation that happened on his watch.
The NTSB said today it will carefully investigate sensors, alarms, and the rules set by railroads. It also plans to hold a rare investigative hearing in East Palestine this spring.
The Joe Rogan experience.
Now, I don't know if they have to take additional precautions due to traveling with hazardous waste and whether or not those precautions
Destiny,
were
what
or
is that
not
game you are
taken.
playing?
They are billions.
That's what I'm hearing about this case, is that this is something that they were trying to cut money by transporting these things that are hazardous waste in a way that perhaps maybe they shouldn't have been transported that way, or maybe the regulation should be different.
I don't know if it's even hazardous waste, though. I think it's just chemicals that we use in plastic.
Oh, it's very hazardous. It's not waste.
Right.
Hazardous materials.
Right. It's very hazardous material.
It's
I don't think
it hits the
it's
ground.
like the byproduct. Yeah.
No, it's very dangerous materials.
But that's why there's this one kid, Nick Drum, who's been doing these amazing TikToks that I'm obsessed with because he's like a chemist.
Yes.
And he's great. He's actually taking taking what the APA is releasing and he's trying to make sense of it.
So let's talk about the trail derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. East Palestine's about an hour north of Pittsburgh, almost halfway to Cleveland. Norfolk Southern has a rail line that goes right through town, and this derailment happened right on the edge outside of town on the border of PA and Ohio.
Okay.
The cars that crashed, 5 of them contained vinyl chloride. It's a monomer used to make PVC. The reporting on this has gotten vinyl chloride confused with polyvinyl chloride, the polymer made out of vinyl chloride. Now, the reason that this distinction is really important is vinyl chloride is very hazardous and very flammable. Polyvinyl chloride is a plastics that's used in like everything.
Okay.
Another thing about vinyl chloride is that it boils at 8 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's shipped in its liquid form, meaning that when these trains crashed and these started leaking, they weren't just leaking liquid, but they were spewing boiling gas. So vinyl chloride is really toxic. OSHA has the permissible limit of how much you can be exposed to it during an 8-hour shift as a 1 ppm part per million, average over 8 hours. So prior to this, the biggest spill of this chemical was in New Jersey, where one train car and about 23,000 gallons of vinyl chloride were spilled, but it didn't catch on fire. Now, this crash in Ohio has 5 train cars. These kinds of tanker cars can carry between 25 and 33,000 gallons.
Okay.
Let's call it 250 to 250,000 pounds of vinyl chloride. That's per train car, 5 train cars. There's maybe 1 million pounds of this toxic chemical spilling into the ground and also boiling off into the air. But then it caught on fire. I think this is where the reporting is really bad because no one is mentioning what the byproduct of vinyl chloride burning is. Of the many byproducts of burning vinyl chloride, one of them is hydrogen chloride. Hydrogen chloride is really unstable and latches onto water, like just water vapor in the atmosphere, and that turns into hydrochloric acid. So right now, government officials from the railroad, both the governor of Pennsylvania and Ohio are calling burning off the 1 million pounds of this stuff a success, but not mentioning that it means that we have hundreds of thousands of pounds of acid in the air, potentially. Now, ever since engineering school, I've studied a lot of industrial accidents. I just find it really fascinating, and organizations like the Chemical Safety Board, NTSB, and OSHA all have like really good reports available to the public. I think as a designer, it's really good to learn about mistakes. When looking at these kinds of industrial disasters across time, there are a couple things that are pretty universal across all of them. One, the responsible party, in this case, Norfolk Southern Railway, always plays down the reality of the situation. Politicians also just repeat the same lines, and then news outlets just repeat the same. So all we're hearing is the responsible party's word. This hasn't been getting...
So, Jamie, I also sent you a video that shows what it looks like in the area where these clouds are passing over, and it is horrific. It's a
There are studies that BC can take as many as 108 days to dissipate from wells and aquifers. No one is mentioning the dioxins created by the burn, faced with peaking iron.
Shit that they're burning from East Palestine, and he's freaking out, and you know, like, animals are dying, pets are dying, fish are dying in the rivers. The idea that they only evacuated a small area.
Yeah.
Like, you're talking about like miles and miles away from this.
Yeah.
Animals are dying. This is it. Look at this. Play this. Go full screen with this because it's so
These
crazy.
aren't storm clouds. This is the fucking shit that they burn off. The fucking shit they burn off in East Palestine. This is not fucking storm clouds.
Oh my God.
Look at this.
I know.
Look at it. This is over Darlington.
Bro, you okay? Little bro having a breakdown.
It's insane.
It's
If you're
insane.
just listening, what we're looking at is just intense black clouds covering this area, and it's daytime,
Yeah.
and you can't see shit. The sky is completely covered in black. Give me the volumes.
Shit from East Palestine. They're fucking controlled burn.
Yeah. It's
The idea is a
fucked
controlled
up.
burn is so crazy.
Well, I guess because they were worried that it was going to explode. That's why they felt they had to burn it.
But it did explode, right? Didn't
No,
it catch
they
fire?
felt it was going to be a massive explosion.
And this would have happened anyway. but there's no other options.
And they like in one of that kid's
Well, what else were they
TikToks,
supposed to
like,
do, I
later
guess?
on, he talks about how they just buried it. And so people are saying they did this just to get the trains running again, basically, which, again, the cynic in me wouldn't doubt, but I don't know. I just sent you a text from my editor, Joe Donatelli, who I loved from Playboy. He now lives in Ohio, and he's does local news. And I will say local news has been great on this. They're actually reporting. And like he said to me, you have to be able to like muster the resources, fact check things. It isn't as fast as the internet where there's a void of information that gets filled. And he did a long thread about what they've learned at the local news station where he is. I think local news is actually pretty good on this, but some people in Ohio are saying they didn't even know about it.
I've heard so many weird, first of all, I don't know if anybody else had this thing, but I heard like 50 million people saying no one's reporting this, no one's reporting this, no one's reporting this. I feel like I saw fucking wall-to-wall coverage on this shit in like across all of Reddit and Twitter. Am I crazy? I was on a chlorine response hazmat team for a few years. Burning off the contents of damaged rail cars is super common. There's sometimes nothing else you can really do safely. How common burn off chemicals train spill?
People who live 1 mile from the train derailment site had to evacuate. Janet Hill says state police came to her home Monday afternoon, just hours before the controlled burn of vinyl chloride. All
right, conservatives in chat, give me your conspiracy theories. What are you guys mad about for this? What do you guys think is happening?
Was in 5 of the derailed tanker cars. Before that, she stuck it out at home.
It was bad. You could see the flames from here, and we're pretty far out of town.
2 days after the burn, authorities...
Well, what do you know? Cleveland, Ohio wants to be the first 15-minute smart city in the United States. And in case you were wondering, East Palestine is 90 miles away from Cleveland, Ohio. So, knowing that the government is able to seize any land that they deem polluted or contaminated, it seems pretty clear that they have created a disaster so that they can usher in their solution, a 15-minute smart city, where everything you do, everything you eat, and wherever you go will be tracked.
I don't even know if these are lefties or conservatives anymore. Who the fuck is this person? Awake to corruption. Ready for Jesus. I think that's a conservative.
We talked with an expert about the dangers chemicals like vinyl chloride pose to people.
Of course, it's an irritant at high concentrations. It can irritate the skin, eyes, mucous membranes. When you inhale it, it'll irritate the lungs. However, one of the things that has not been talked about as often are the long-term effects, which of course it causes cancer.
Residents who live in the 1 mile radius of the original evacuation could request to get their air monitored inside of their home, but Hill thinks testing should be expanded.
Wait, does this guy look a little bit like the Bogdadoff dude or whatever? Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Those weird twins?
Got people walking around completely dissociated because everything in their daily environment tells them to pick up the dry cleaning.
Right.
And, you know, oh,
everything's fine.
Oh.
Is it a little bit annoying to people that experience dissociation or have experienced dissociation that like people just throw that word around when they just mean like you're kind of like a little bit lost and aimless? I'm pretty sure that's not what disassociated means or dissociation means. I like how people just like say that to like, oh, I'm so dissociated. What do you mean by that? Oh, I don't know. I just don't like have any motivation to do anything. And it's like, okay, I guess.
At least in the Cuban Missile Crisis, my father was driving across country. I said, you knew it was he says, everybody knew it was the Cuban Missile Crisis. Every single town that he drove through, he would stop and the TV would be on. People were talking about it, right? We are in some world where, and I think that we have to just talk about the fact that the United States is attacking ordinary, intelligent human beings by depriving them of any basic knowledge of what is actually going on. We don't know what happened with the origin of COVID. We have no idea about Epstein. We don't know what's going on with the vaccines. We don't understand.
What are you talking about? I feel like we have unprecedented. I feel like the issue is we have too much information today. We have like unprecedented access to like fucking everything. It's like insane. I feel like we're on information overload right now.
And the source of the inflation. We blinded ourselves from looking at the M1 monetary aggregate when the Fed pumped us full of cheap cash. We have no clue how to resolve, something as dumb as the Epstein. To whom did Ghislaine traffic? I don't know.
Yeah, well, can't find it. Sorry, bye.
So this is what's causing, in part, our friends to go crazy. Several years ago, Sam Harris had good input. Jordan Peterson had good input. Brett Weinstein had good input. Most of them, I don't think, have figured out that they're starved for information, and I'm going to say something very heterodox to the heterodoxy. The heterodoxy was never meant to take over for the orthodoxy. The orthodoxy was something that needed correction. The purpose of the heterodoxy is to say, you're 12 degrees off, you're 3 degrees off. Mm-hmm. What do you do when you're like 168 degrees off? And all, like the fine tuning that heterodoxy can do is not sufficient to correct this ship. And what's happening to us, and I said this to Sam at a dinner with Dave Rubin right before Trump took over. I said, Sam, if you don't take a different approach to Trump, he's going to blow out your circuits. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, for every ambiguous thing that you can't resolve with Trump, raise 2 to that power. So if he puts 3 ambiguities in a series, you have 2 to the 3rd possibilities of what could be true. That's 8. He can create a decision tree that explodes faster than you, Sam Harris, can think.
Please do some research on stream about the Epstein shit. So many people believe he was murdered. There's no research that can be done. It's like all of these conspiracies today. People assert it, but there's just no evidence. Like, there's nothing you can research about the Epstein murder conspiracy because there's no evidence for it. Like, there's nothing to... They'll say, like, oh, some of the cameras went out or whatever. And it's like, okay. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. That. I guess 100% he was murdered then? Like, it's all speculation and conjecture. Like, everything is. All the conspiracy theories today are speculation and conjecture. And there's nothing to validate, nothing to verify, nothing to go over. So I don't know what to say.
Right? There's no way you can get to 2 to the 4th possibilities on a decision tree. And Sam, I don't think he understood the perspective. And so what happened was we were all swimming in this world where nobody could tell which end was up. Nobody can resolve anything. And I think a lot of this has to do...
I'm not sure I understand what you were just saying there.
Okay.
This decision tree thing, that Sam, he was going to blow... Explain that?
Wouldn't the questions be, why did the cameras go out? Yeah, I'd have to go and look up exactly which cameras went out. But my understanding is, like, there was a huge... was it a New York Times? It might have been some alternative media site. Our prisons suck. There are so many issues with cameras, with inmates getting murdered, with inmates killing themselves, with guards killing inmates. There was like 100-some stories listed on this page, but we never, ever, ever talk about it. We never have that conversation. And then when Epstein dies, now all of a sudden it's like, wait a second, they didn't have the most stringent when he was on psycho, blah, blah, blah. And I guess they probably should have been more stringent, but like people die in our prisons all the time. It's just that nobody gives a about it. But now when it happened to Epstein, now people really care. There were cameras on the entry/exit hallways to the cell that stayed on. Nobody went in or out. Yeah. Destiny is just lying. McBLT Games. If you want to hop on Discord and you want to give me your best Steelman version of somebody murdered Epstein, go for it. But I've never seen any compelling evidence ever about it. I just haven't seen anything. If you want to hop on and tell me, then...
So let's imagine, for example, that I'm staying at a local hotel.
Okay.
And you don't know whether I'm staying at the Hyatt or the Four Seasons.
Okay.
And you also can't figure out whether I'm leaving at 1 o'clock or at 2 o'clock. And you don't know whether I'm going to be arriving by a white Prius or a black Escalade. You now have too many possibilities as to, well, what's the drive time for those 2 hotels is different. I don't know which car I'm looking for. There are 8 possibilities now of what could actually be happening because those are all independent.
Right.
When Trump created ambiguities, or now the Biden group is creating ambiguities by not telling us what's actually going on, you don't know how serious this East Palestine, Ohio spill is. Is this something that's going to burn off pretty easily, or is this getting into the corn crop that's going to be found in all processed food? I don't know. I don't know how much.
It's a very good question.
Right. Okay. So just every day you're being assaulted by completely unnecessary ambiguities.
Yeah, these IDW guys always feel like they're so... I don't even know what the you're saying. I feel like you didn't say anything of substance in 4 minutes. Am I crazy? I don't know. Oh yeah, it's that the Atlantic article I think was the one. 32 short stories about death in prison. I don't understand what Eric Weinstein is saying. It's so simple. The lack of information means more possibilities for what could be true. It's an epistemic issue. He literally gave you multiple examples. You aren't paying attention. I am paying attention. His sentence doesn't make sense. We have more information available to us than at any other point in human history. There aren't more and more and more possibilities. There were probably more possibilities 30 or 40 or 50 or 100 years ago. People just weren't thinking about it as much. You know what the problem is? Here, this is the problem, okay? The ending conversation about how there's not enough context surrounding information on the internet, and all you get are these meaningless little contextless clips that are devoid of anything that lead you down 50 million different roads. I actually think the ending speech of Metal Gear Solid 2, I think actually summarizes pretty well, as strange as that is, where we're at today in terms of digital information on the internet, which is crazy because this game basically came out like before the internet really existed. That was his exact point, though. We have more things to be unsure of than ever before. Too many ambiguities. Yeah, but it's not because we don't have enough information. It's because there's too much. We're overwhelmed with crazy random shit. We're overwhelmed with information today. Is it this? Metal Gear Solid 2 predicts current year.
Human memories, ideas, culture, history.
Yeah, spooky music and everything.
Genes don't contain any record of human history.
Is it something that should not be passed on? Should that information be left at the mercy of nature?
We've always kept records of our lives, through words, pictures, symbols, from tablets to books.
But not all the information was inherited by later generations. A small percentage of the whole was selected and processed, then passed on. Not unlike genes, really.
That's what history is, Jack.
But in the current digitized world, trivial information is accumulating every second, preserved in all its triteness, never fading, always accessible.
Rumors about petty issues, misinterpretations, slander.
All this junk data, preserved in an unfiltered state, growing at an alarming rate.
It will only slow down social progress, reduce the rate of evolution.
Right. You seem to think that our plan is one of censorship.
Are you telling me it's not?
You're being silly. What we propose to do is not to control content, but to create context.
Create context?
The digital society furthers human flaws and selectively rewards development of convenient half-truths. Just look at the strange juxtapositions of morality around you.
Okay, too tip-tippy. It was interesting, though, the idea that the in the first Metal Gear Solid game you play, the idea is to have a thing that shoots nukes at everybody, and that's how they want to control the world. But in the second one, it's literally just the idea that you control information, you can control the world, which was an interesting concept at the time because the internet wasn't really that big of a thing yet. But yeah, I don't think the issue is that we don't have enough information available to us. I think the issue is we have all sorts of like random. Anybody can come on today and have a platform, right? Like, look at how influential I am with no formal training. I'm not even masters in League of Legends. or look at Tate's like exploding on fucking TikTok, or look at people like Tim Pool or whatever. Like, I don't know. I just think I don't think it matters. I don't think anybody realizes what the problems are. They just think it's all like media being biased or some stupid shit is what everybody thinks. But whatever.
Today we're going to be taking another look at just how much of an ecological disaster this derailment and subsequent fire was in Ohio. I'm just going to give you the rough breakdown of what was leaked and what are the potential hazards. You know, a lot of people look at the big black cloud and say this is a disaster because it looks bad. And to me, I don't really care so much about the stuff that's burnt off. For reasons I'll come to shortly.
Destiny sure loves games with trains.
True.
You see there's a lot of derailed cars here. The oil, if there's oil or stuff in there, that's probably a bigger environmental hazard than the toxic chemicals that were leaked. And again, I've got no real dog in this fight. You know, if this, the derailment obviously happened for a reason. It obviously caused a lot of damage. And whoever is responsible, yeah, you should regulate these things, learn from these mistakes. Let's take a look at the chemical that was actually leaked, which was vinyl chloride. Vinyl chloride looks something like this. When you burn it, right, this stuff is fairly volatile. It's about the same physical properties as gas lighter fluid. So, you know, you leave it unattended for a few minutes, it'll all evaporate into the air. The chemical itself is pretty noxious stuff. For certain, you wouldn't want to be anywhere near this while the stuff is venting into the atmosphere. But the atmosphere is fairly big, dilutes stuff fairly well. So, you know, as long as you're not local to it, that wouldn't probably be too much of a problem. In terms of environmental damage, it's a gas, this stuff, but, you know, like all stuff, it'll dissolve in water, and it's fairly toxic. So they made the decision that they were going to burn it off. And when you burn the stuff off, the carbons go to carbon dioxide. The hydrogens mostly end up
For a Thunderfoot, the reason why Thunderfoot fell off, or if you don't know who he is, was because he was kind of like a gamer. I think he got popular in the Gamergate atheism days. But unfortunately, he was a idiot, and he actually was kind of principled in what he was saying. So when all of the other reactionary Gamergate atheist dipshit, like anti-SJW people hopped onto the Trump train, he didn't, because he rightfully understands that Trump's a lunatic. And I think he lost a lot of his audience then, because all of the people in that sphere were hopping hardcore onto the Trump train, and he didn't. And so everybody hated him. But yeah.
In water.
But his training, I think he's a professional. I think he's like a professional chemist, like by trade. But 1 million subs, not bad. The issue isn't his sub count. I think his viewership is pretty low, unless it's recovered. Actually, you know what? He's doing okay. He's getting like 1 to 2 million views a month. That's not too bad.
So, how damaging is 100 tons of hydrochloric acid to Ohio? So if we come back to our train wreck and we take a look at the size of Ohio, 100 billion meters squared, and we're going to take a look at the rainfall, typical rainfall for Ohio, which is, according to this, about 30 inches per year. It's about a meter per year, which is actually very nice for our numbers. So that's going to be 300 million tons of water per day, and we have 100 odd tons of HCl to dissolve in that. Acidity goes on a scale called pH, which is basically the sort of concentration of acid in your solution. And with HCl, you know, the chlorine just dissolves in these solutions as chloride, no different from sort of sodium chloride. It's the acid is the dangerous stuff, but you know, we're going to go on the basis that, well, every chlorine that you put in there is an acid. So 1 part in 10 million is pH 7. That's basically natural. That's pure water. So down here you're at basically battery acid, that sort of thing. Here is pure water, and somewhere in the middle, around here somewhere, is like lemon juice, which is actually pretty toxic stuff. You know, you put your fish in lemon juice, they don't live very long. 300 million tons of water per day was the rainfall on Ohio, and you have 100 tons of HCl dissolved in that. So it's about 1 part in a million. You're in this sort of region, which is, yeah, and that's assuming that it's just diluted in all the water in Ohio over a single day.
Okay.
Not quite true, of course, in that, yeah, the way these things burn. Yeah, so you have your fire here. The heat and the such like, the fire makes it go up.
Yep.
You saw that in the big plume
True.
of burning stuff.
Fire go up.
And then it sort of drifts down stream and it dissolves in the water as it goes. And eventually some of it will come back down to Earth. And but my expectation would be that it actually takes quite a long time to come down. And the water going through the rivers will dilute the acid very quickly. So the HCl, as a general rule, or any acid spill like this, dilution kills it pretty quick. Yeah, you expect locally where there are high concentrations of acid, you're going to kill off the fish life and that sort of thing but long term, there's basically no damage. Within everything will come back very quickly. There's no long-term hazard from HCl. Once it's washed away...
Tell everyone link the stream, you got 6K viewers.
Wow.
And you bear in mind this, you dilute it over all of the water in Ohio over a single day, you're basically at harmless levels. Over several days, dilution just kills these things. Take a look at the population of Ohio. It's 10 million odd people. Okay? 10 million people. And let's say they all wash their hair 1 time per day with 10 grams. That's a relatively small amount of
hydrochloric or
whatever shampoo.
Whatever the called.
So 10 grams is 0.01.
Oh, he's saying that right.
Kilograms, and oh god.
What's the name of the chemical that everybody's worried about? What's it called again? Hydrochlorine, or what is it called? Why does he talk so slow? I don't know. Oh, vinyl chloride. Okay.
So that's 100th of a kilo, and so that means that if you've got 10, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's your people in Ohio, and you're using 100th of a gram per day. This is how many grams of shampoo you put into the water supply every day, which is 100 tons. So, the expectation is you're dumping huge amounts of stuff like that into the water supply on a daily basis. And, this would also go if you were adding bleach to the bleach is something like that. But, you'll be dumping similar amounts of all of these chemicals into the water supply on a daily basis.
Okay.
And it's decentralized.
Wouldn't the combustion of vinyl chloride produce phosphine as well as hydrochloric acid?
I don't know. I'm not a chemist. I'm guessing you heard that from a thing, but I mean, I'm listening to what this guy's saying right here, and apparently he says burning it off is not a big deal, but we can look up more specifically what it means to burn it off later, I guess. It should actually be pretty easy because we're talking about if we're talking chemistry, it's just a matter of looking at the reactions, right?
Yeah, a lot of this stuff, when it's diluted, these are things that the wildlife can live on. So the stuff that would probably bother me more if I'm looking at stuff to be worried about here isn't so much all of the stuff that's burnt off, right? Because that's now mostly carbon dioxide, which is harmless, water, which is harmless, hydrochloric acid, which dilution kills fairly quickly. The black smoke on the other...
Wait, is that what that guy just donated was worried?
Hydrochloric acid, which dilution kills fairly quickly.
Okay, so he's saying the hydrochloric acid would dilute fairly quickly, so...
The black smoke, on the other hand, this tends to be evil, carcinogenic, burning plastic. It's
Destiny, can you pause the video for like 3 seconds?
Nope.
Which tend to be pretty noxious, carcinogenic stuff. But again, it'll be spread over a large area. The stuff that would bother me more is if there was any stuff in all of these rail cars that can't be burned off. Right, so the vinyl chloride that they burned off has a similar volatility. Basically, they had 2 options. You could either let it evaporate off slowly, which would have dumped all of the vinyl chloride, which is much more toxic, into the atmosphere, or you can burn it. Either way, it would have gone by the time they
What is being poorly reported on and intensely measured at the dioxins?
Okay, we'll look at that next.
It's volatile, yeah. They unless they were keeping it in pressurized cans, it would have evaporated off at some point, or the rail cars, if they weren't pressurized, would have pressurized and exploded. But it's what was the other stuff in there, right? So if you just were transporting regular sorry, fuel oil or some stuff, that will be a much bigger environmental problem in that it's not volatile, that it won't just evaporate on its own, and it will take forever to disperse. It won't, fundamentally it's still like only going to be a few hundred tons or something, but it's more like an oil spill now. And the problem is with these, with things like fuel oil, is it lingers in the environment. Eventually the bacteria will eat it and such like, but until then, that's also fairly toxic to the wildlife and such like. So anyway, those are just some quick thoughts on why, all the big plumes of smoke and having hydrochloric acid coming out of the atmosphere doesn't actually bother me so much because, dilution just kills it.
What a great video.
And now what we're dealing with is pretty consistent. So we're going to get to see this pattern change and shift towards heavy amounts of rain coming in for you later on this evening. It'll be early evening into mid-evening that the front starts to move into Southern California, and that's when the intense rain arrives. That's also when the snow starts to amplify, but it's already snowing and it's already raining. So we're just adding to what's going on this morning. This morning we are dealing with...
Bro, no one cares about the weather, ever. Train wreck site 2 days ago. Ground zero.
This is ground zero.
Okay.
This is absolute ground zero. Now, for safety reasons, I will not go any further. But you can see right over there. Right over there. That's where it all happened. Now, I don't see any of these workers or anyone wearing masks. It's like everything's okay. But you can tell right here when you look at the water. You can see the chemicals are in there. It's all there. And this is one of the biggest disasters in American history, and the Biden administration does nothing but send money to Ukraine because it's a money laundering operation.
Well, I guess we'll just listen to this guy scream.
Everyone as an American should be sickened by this. Right over there. See all those, and they're still using the same tracks. Anyways, for safety concerns, I will not be here for long. As a matter of fact, I'm getting the hell out of here right now. Let's go, dude.
Does he really think that it's so dangerous that he can get this close, but not?
We tried to let you back finally, but you have chosen the path of pain. I'm like an insane killer ape. I need sleeping time right now.
This is a regulatory kind of rule that transportation
Pete Buttigieg already said that he's not interested in this. Now, of course, part of the reason why Pete or Joe Biden or anyone doesn't even feel the need to address this or talk about it is because the media is not covering it. There is not.
Why do people keep saying the media is not covering it? I feel like I saw this covered by so many different people in media.
Felt like stories like this need to be way more covered on the mainstream media instead of us just shooting down UFOs. So two things I want to hit on there. One, not always, but more and more it feels like the why is the mainstream media not talking about this stuff? That's being said while mainstream media is talking about that stuff. It feels like more and more people are saying that to then drive more traffic to however they're covering.
Not enough anger. East Palestine is a tiny ass town with 5,000 people in it, and nobody really gives a shit. This will continue happening over and over and over again, just like the railway union said it would. It's just going to happen to a larger town, going to happen to a more populated area. It's just about assessing the risks in that situation. It's basically about like how much of a stink can we make? How much damage can we get away with? Especially when the media doesn't talk about it. That's the reason why they don't give a shit. That's the reason why the Brandon administration is not doing anything as well.
Because what I'm worried about is, and I'm not just blaming the press here.
What is the Biden administration supposed to do? Like, the accident happened. I think they did all the cleanup procedures. Like,
has broken down. The press does not hold the corporations accountable, does not hold the politicians accountable. Then the politicians go, well, I'm going to get $6 million as the Republican Party is here. From these guys, I'm getting nothing from the other side. And there's no downsides. There's no one telling people that I'm a monster who's in favor of giant fireballs in their neighborhood because I got bribed, right? No.
The media is a very important component of this because they're the ones who are supposed to tie all of this together. And when they don't do that, the dude in Ohio doesn't fully understand who to get mad at, so he continues to get mad at, like, I don't know, gender-neutral bathrooms or whatever the That's an issue. That's a major issue. Very, very frustrating. Not as frustrating as the top of the hour ad break, which everyone in that town of Ohio will be able to avoid if they use their $5 that they got. I don't think Norfolk Southern actually took like a serious hit in the stock market. It's by design. They know that these cost-cutting initiatives could potentially cause these massive disasters, but ultimately you just throw 25 grand at the victims and move on, knowing full well that the media is not really going to cover it, knowing full well that the government is not going to come seeking answers. Literally, there are people in every corporation that's doing this in actuarial sizes. They're doing this kind of risk mitigation. What is your life worth to them? And what happens if there's an environmental disaster? In this circumstance, it's wonderful because again, it's a whole bunch of mumbo jumbo science, and science is confusing, especially when
Can somebody search me? Was this actually that bad of a disaster? Like, what exactly happened? What is something like permanently destroyed, or East Palestine train derailment Wikipedia? It's being covered now, but it took 10 days for the media to really pay attention to it. I don't think that's true, but okay. Didn't this just happen like 2 weeks ago? 3 weeks ago. Do you think initially there wasn't as much coverage as there could have been just because people don't really care because trains derail and it's like a whatever thing?
Destiny, even the Ohio governor didn't call a state of emergency for the Fed to release funds to them, even though Biden said he'll release funds.
Okay, this was February 3rd, 2023. Archive.org. If I look at like CNN, I'm sorry, I should be CNN.com. The Ohio governor and senators didn't release statements for about a week either. When did they burn the materials? Maybe that's the reason for the difference in coverage. I wonder if it took a few days for them to decide to burn things off. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, it happened February 3rd. Let's just check. Nobody covered this because it wasn't that big of a deal in all reality. The picture of the smoke cloud is what I think caused the scare. Oh, do you think it was just like the social media shit? We'll check the 6th. We'll check the 8th. Here's a CBS article on February 4th. 50-car train derailment in Ohio causes massive fire evacuations. No injuries reported. Oh, well, it's on the 4th. Nothing on CNN's page on the 4th, I think.
The horseshoe once again materializing. Also, I love how conservatives are now wearing masks for HCL and not for COVID.
On the 6th, I see a top story on CNN. So it was at the very least on the 6th, if not sometime on the 4th or 5th. And then nothing on the 8th. I feel like this is, from my very tepid engagement with this story, this is what it feels like to me. And I could be wrong, but it feels like CNN February 11th. Well, here I see February 6th, CNN had a story about it. So clearly, there was media reporting it. But this is what I feel like happened. Here's what I feel like happened. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like the train derailment happened. I feel like nobody cares for 2 reasons. 1, train derailment. 2, Ohio. And then I feel like there was a video that got viral like 2 weeks later with the guy in the cloud. And he's like, this is the shit that they're fucking burning off. And then once that happened, everybody looked at the social media like, oh my God, what's happening? This is crazy. Nobody's reported on it. Nobody's cared. What's going on? And then everybody's like, the media never reported it. But it feels like the reality is that like nobody ever cared about this. But I feel like it was literally that video of the guy screaming at the cloud. Oh, and then I think a woman holding like a dead chicken or something. Yeah, this was reported. This was on CNN on February 4th. Train derailment in Northeast Ohio. So it was reported on by the media. You fucking retards just didn't fucking care about it. And now you are caring about it. Now you're crying that it wasn't like fucking wall-to-wall coverage because you guys weren't all tweeting about it. Dude, I just want to be a StarCraft player. Dude, this sucks. It's so fucking stupid. Because, like, I feel like more of the story these days, just, again, that's just on my tangential engagement bouncing off of what I see on social media. It feels like the story these days isn't even about the story. It's just about the media not covering it. But the media did cover it. You guys just didn't care about it on social media. That's what it feels like, unironically. The issue is unions striking for safety regulations saying this would happen. Okay, but like, were they pushing for a regulation that would have even fixed this particular thing? Like, how many train derailments? Lauren Southern actually tweeted out, I don't know what happened to her brain. She actually tweeted out something really intelligent, which was, how many train derailments actually happen? Is this actually like an abnormal thing? Because I think for a few days, like a week or two ago when this went big, something actually started to happen where every single day now, people are like, oh my God, train derailed here, train derailed here. And people are like, oh my God, there's train derailments everywhere. And it's like, yeah, trains, how many fucking trains move a day in the United States? Of course, there's probably trains derailing at a, like, I doubt it never happens, you know? Does anyone know the typical amount of train derailments in the U.S. annually? Okay, so it looks like 1,704 derailments per year. It's just being reported on more fiercely now due to the nature of the Ohio derailment being significant. I can't believe she tweeted this out. That was actually mind-blowing to me. This is a good thought process, but yeah. When someone says that media didn't cover it, it usually means media didn't get the story the amount of coverage that it deserved, but then it just comes back to the fact that almost no one cares. Yeah, the media probably covers stuff based upon how much engagement they get with it. And chances are, what did happen is when the story came out, nobody really gave a fuck, but then it blew up on social media. Here, this would be really interesting. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God, who's listening? If you work at Vice or anybody, oh my God, I have such a great fucking idea. I wonder if we could do this as a platform. I wonder if you could manufacture a narrative by going back 2 weeks, finding a local story, and then creating a TikTok about it, reacting to it. See if you can get the TikTok to blow up, and then push the idea that retroactively nobody engaged with the story and they were trying to hide it. I feel like you could do that and write a really interesting news story, like a little mini documentary about it. Like, I guarantee you that if I search hard enough, I could probably find like black unarmed man shot cops or whatever. Like this story, I don't know if this was reported on or whatever, or was this big, or police released video of repeated taser on a man who died after arrest. Was this something that got national coverage? I never remember which ones. Daryl Williams, was this a big one? I feel like I remember the taser story, but I don't know if it was this taser story. But I bet we could go back and find, this was huge. Yeah, I think the taser one. I bet you could go back and find one of these stories, then get a black person to go.
You're ignoring this on purpose. Too much focus on evaporative.
I'll look it up, my dude, but it's probably some bullshit, okay? But I bet you could go make a TikTok and say, here's a story of a blah, 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 blah. And then you exaggerate the fuck out of it because half these fuckers lie anyway. This guy had a family, blah, blah, blah. Cops killed him. Why isn't the media talking about this? And then I bet you could drum up a whole bunch of hype and then everybody's going to be fixated on this story. I bet you could literally lead, if you could get one, you just have to get one viral TikTok on it. Guaranteed. What is a dioxin? Governor DeWine, EPA director, drink tap water at home in East Palestine.
Awesome. That's good. That makes us feel better.
Yeah, but it will continue. All right, your studio. Okay.
It reminds me of where's one where Wilson tries to see if House is on like methadone or something, I think, and House drinks the alcohol and he's like, I'm fine, and then he goes outside and he's like throwing up like 5 seconds later. Dioxins are called persistent.
Are you eating this one hand or two hand?
I'm two-handing your mom. I don't care about the house club anymore. Dioxins are called persistent organic pollutants, POPs, meaning they take a long time to break down once they're in the environment. Dioxins are highly toxic and could cause cancer, reproductive and developmental problems, damage to the immune system, can generate dioxins found throughout the world environment. They accumulate in food chains, concentrate mainly in the fatty tissue of animals. More than 90% of typical human exposures estimated by EPA to be through the intake of animal fats, mainly meat, dairy products, fish, and shellfish. Dioxins, East Palestine train. What are dioxins, and did the Ohio train crash release them into the air? Sources raise concerns about a type of
Tyler eating 3 while Destiny picking 2 is why Tyler is a god gamer at League, while Destiny is still talking about starting a media company and not doing shit.
They joined some of the town's residents and environmentalists from the U.S. Here's a look at the dioxins, the potential harms, and highly toxic. Dioxins refer to a group of toxic chemical compounds that persist in the environment for a long time. Residents near the fire could have been exposed to the land of their skin or breathing the lungs. Skin exposure to high concentrations can cause as chloracne and intense skin inflammation. But the main pathway that dioxin gets in the human body is not directly through something like burning, through consumption of meat, dairy, fish, blah, blah, blah. That's why it's important for authorities to investigate the site now. Does burning vinyl chloride create dioxins? Linda Birnbaum, a leading dioxins researcher, toxicologist, and former director of the National Institute for Environmental Health Sciences, said that burning vinyl chloride does create dioxins. Other experts agree the accidents could have created them. The tremendous black fumes in East Palestine suggest the combustion process left lots of complex carbon compounds behind, says Murray McBride, a Cornell University soil and crop scientist. McBride said it will be hard to say for sure whether these compounds were released until testing is done where the train cars derailed, which is likely why residents, blah, 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 are the environment. Okay, so are they doing testing for it? Is there any proof or evidence that there's like a significant amount of dioxins that have been released so far? Or is there, are there a reason we're not testing for it? Or you have to click. Oh! Oh my god! Yeah, he threw that card at her. He definitely just threw a card at her. I don't know why. Lady bumping man with her cart repeatedly. Lil bro's got some anger issues. Look up Breaking Point's water, East Palestine. This is where you get your news from? Okay. Well, let's see what they have to say.
Ohio, we've of course been covering the aftermath of that train derailment and their decision to do a quote-unquote controlled release, which was a giant fireball of toxic chemicals that has had lingering impacts on the community and that politicians have been very slow to react to. All right, so backdrop is...
When I hear, so just as I'm listening to media, these are statements I'm always critical of. So she said it had lingering impacts on the community. How? What kind? Like dead animals? Were people going to the hospital? I wonder what those... Sure would have been nice if she gave us like one more sentence there to engage with, but okay.
Remember, we track this very close. Lever News has done the best coverage of detailing the way that industry corruption has consistently stripped safety regulations, starting with the Obama administration, who sort of buckled under pressure and limited the scope of the new safety regulations that they were putting in place. Then Trump arguably did the most damage by completely rolling back even some of the safety regs that the Obama administration had put in place, in particular with regards to this braking system. You have the Biden administration maintains its status quo and, of course, joins with Republicans to crush the workers' movement that was trying to raise concerns, safety concerns, specifically, you know, about potential incidents like this. So Trump's hands are not clean on this issue whatsoever, quite the opposite. However, man knows how to spot a political opportunity. And while Joe Biden was in Ukraine, Trump traveled to East Palestine. Here's what he had to say.
We're bringing thousands of bottles of water, Trump water, actually, most of it. Some of it we had to go to a much lesser quality water. You want to get those Trump bottles, I think, more than anybody else. But we're bringing a lot of water, thousands of bottles, and we have it in trucks, and we brought some on my plane today. And Norfolk Southern needs to fulfill its responsibilities and obligations. And I see that they're starting to come here now, too, because they also were saying they're not coming. But it means that the affected communities beyond the borders of East Palestine are going to be taken care of. And they've said so, and they've said it loud and clear, and I think they probably mean it. I sincerely hope that when your representatives and all of the politicians get here, including Biden, they get back from touring Ukraine, that he's got some money left over. Biden and FEMA said they would not send federal aid to East Palestine under any circumstance. They're not going to send aid. I thought that was a strange statement because...
Let's look that up. FEMA, East Palestine, Ohio. Do you think it's bad luck for Biden to not go to Ohio? I don't know. I guess he needs to know. I mean, if something blows up big enough on Twitter or TikTok, Twitter is literally real life now, so yeah, I guess you kind of have to. Multiple federal agencies supporting East Palestine, contrary to partisan claims. FEMA officials provide update on East Palestine train derailment recovery efforts. Within 3 hours, when the Norfolk Southern reported a train derailment in East Ohio, the U.S. EPA was on the scene. The EPA is one of several federal agencies that has responded to the accident, in which 11 freight cars, blah, blah, blah. 3 days after the crash, rail workers emptied about 115,000 gallons of vinyl chloride and burned it in a controlled release. The crash and chemical release prompted an evacuation of nearby residents and necessitated ongoing monitoring of air and water quality. The derailment was likely caused by an overheated wheel bearing, according to a preliminary report by the National Transportation Safety Board. Despite the visible presence of federal workers there, partisan commentators and some politicians suggest that President Joe Biden's administration have denied aid. Many who are making the claim have compared the response in Ohio with Biden's recent visit to Ukraine, which promised additional $500 million military aid. Okay, so is it just... Watch the interview that the governor and state representatives give, Republicans, by the way, saying how the federal government is providing everything that they have asked for. I don't know where the link to that is, but...
Working with FEMA
Watch the
for a
interview
long
that the
time,
governor
4
and state
years,
representatives
and they were-
give, Republicans, ETW, saying how the federal government is providing everything that they have asked for.
Thanks, Chief.
Great with us with the tornadoes, the hurricanes, and things.
Anything you need, I have not called him back. Look, the president called me and said, anything you need, I have not called him back after that conversation. I will not hesitate to do that if we're seeing a problem or anything, but I'm not seeing it. Look, the president called me and said...
Okay, so these are all just lies. Okay. I mean, it's Trump, so of course, but okay. FEMA declined since they do tornadoes and hurricanes and left it for the EPA, CDC, and another agency. Then FEMA came through later. Okay.
Things like this. What's your specialty today?
How are you today? Nice to meet you.
Hello, everybody. That's a nice, beautiful looking group of babies. So I know this menu better than you do. Okay? I probably know it better than anybody in here. We're going to take care of the fire department.
Okay.
We're going to take care of the police department.
So that last piece there was him at McDonald's for those of you
just
listening, which is
he said,
like
I know the McDonald's menu better than
we
you
could
do.
have
Probably true, actually.
Yeah.
Given how
But-
much the man loves McDonald's.
You know, and there's a lot to say about this, actually. First of all, clearly his political instincts still on point. Democrats handed him an absolute layup. They're such morons. Pete.
But they gave him a layup because of people like you, right? That's the problem. The layup didn't come because Trump did anything good or because he's got good political instincts or whatever else. They gave him a layup because people like you said he gave him a layup. Like...
Not going there yet. Biden not going there yet. I mean, opening up this space to make that talking point of, hey, he's in Ukraine, we're here, and I hope they still have some money for you guys when they get back.
Brutal.
And then the other piece is a media story, which is, you know, he wouldn't be able to get away with going there and pretending like, oh, this has nothing to do with me and I'm just here to try to help, if the media had done their job of explaining that backstory of corruption and how his hands are very dirty in terms of caving to industry pressure. But since they don't do that, he can just ride in like a hero and distribute his Trump bottles of water.
Look, Trump is back. I mean, I can feel it. I can sense it. I haven't seen. He's fun again in a way that McDonald's, you know. And look, I'm not saying this gives me pleasure to say this. My whole monologue is really about his own record with respect to foreign policy. All I'm saying is, pure politically, for him to waltz into a town clearly neglected, force the media to cover it, it's just like exactly what he did with Flint in 2016. You remember that, Trump? Yep. And he actually won Flint, if we'll recall. There's that good documentary about the Flint Police Department and how they all so much supported him in 2016, and it caused like a big political stir at the time. And then the deadliest talking point of all, he's in Ukraine, I'm over here. I hope he has some money that is left over for you. And, you know, the moment, actually, while the Biden speech was happening, I texted them while I was abroad, and I was like, hey, immediately what popped in my head, Kyiv before East Palestine. And then Secretary Buttigieg is visiting today after Donald Trump. What is the guy doing? I remain, it's like, how can you possibly have not immediately gotten on a plane?
This is why I get more and more irritated, and I fight back so often now when people are like, oh, bro, like, it's just Twitter, it's not real life. It's like, Twitter is real life. Like, real life is having to follow Twitter's lead. Like, that's how important social media is dictating our media environment now.
Now the President Biden has yet to put out any full comments or anything on East Palestine. There's no announced visit.
Yeah.
Where is Kamala Harris? I mean, send somebody. Like, at the very least, Buttigieg was supposed to, he should have been there a week ago, if you think about it. Maybe more, 9-10 days ago.
Yeah.
He should have been one of the very first people on the ground with a FEMA director. She should have had the Ohio governor and all those people right next to him be like, I'm taking charge. I'm not leaving East Palestine until this is all done. Where is he? Oh, I know where he is. He's here in Washington taking personal time. We'll tell you a little bit about that.
Yeah, we'll tell you about that
later, when he got mad at a reporter for actually asking him when he was going to visit East Palestine.
Well, and here's another piece, is the Republican governor of the state, Mike DeWine, does not come out looking good in any of this either. He admitted before that the White House had called him and he just didn't call them back to ask for aid for the area. He also, he was...
Well, it sounds like it wasn't that he was too stupid or dumb to ask. It sounded like they had the resources they needed, right? Assuming the EPA and the CDC or whatever were on the scene and ready 3 hours after it happened, unless all those news articles are just lying. But assuming that was the case, then he probably just doesn't need anything. It's just, what are you going to do? It's they have to show up. There's probably a process that they do to alleviate whatever the disaster is, and then you move on. I don't know that if Joe Biden showing up and getting on his hands and knees to clean shit, or Pete Buttigieg showing up so that you can make gay jokes about him or whatever. I don't know how any of this shit helps it other than scores points on social media. But
asked a question. We've been tracking the water test results that were used to give the all clear to residents to say it's all good, you can drink the water, no problem here. And it has increasingly become clear that the EPA relied predominantly on a contractor that was paid for by Norfolk Southern themselves. So the polluters paid for these water tests that the Ohio EPA was predominantly relying on. DeWine got asked a question by this, I believe it was by our friend Rich McHugh, News Nation, now investigative reporter who we've known for quite a while. Fantastic journalist who's been there on the ground, who we had on the show earlier in the week. In any case, DeWine reveals he really doesn't have a clue what's going on, hands it off to the Ohio EPA director, who basically confirms the outlines of that story. Let's take a listen to that.
Has the EPA tested the water independently?
Yes, we're testing it independently.
Was it initially tested in conjunction
I'd
with
have to
Norfolk Southern?
ask my director.
The Norfolk Southern contractor did AECOM. They did their own testing. That same sample at the same time was collected by the county and sent to a separate lab.
The Ohio EPA confirming to News Nation it was done in conjunction at first, but will now begin its own independent testing starting today. And Pete Buttigieg announcing he will finally come here to the crash site, responding to criticism he did not visit sooner.
To be clear, our department was on the ground within hours. I could have spoken out sooner, and I'm making sure that we are focused on the actions that are going to make a difference.
So DeWine there's, oh yeah, we're doing our own independent testing. And then he's like, well, I don't really know. Let me get to the EPA director, who's like, well, not actually. Now we're starting to do our own independent testing after they've already told people it's all safe and fine.
It's a disaster. Look, Biden administration and the Republican governor here have left the greatest political opening of all time. And with Buttigieg at this point, I don't know how in the hell that this guy continues to have a job. And Biden himself,
because he didn't go for a photo op? That's your major fuck up? They didn't go for a photo op? Oh.
Biden, you could always say his political instincts were at least better than a lot of the people in the media, right? A lot of the elites in the party. He has lost it. Clearly some of that. The idea of visiting a foreign country while you're dispensing hundreds of billions of dollars to them and literally giving the greatest talking point of all time, that he cares about another country and another country's borders more.
Was he not supposed to go? Wait, what? I don't understand. Oh, Zerka's server muted. I'm sorry. That's why Zerka couldn't talk. Okay, I'm watching this.
That's all you're going to hear from the Republican Party. And why shouldn't you? Because now it's creating the political pressure on the Biden administration where they feel on the back foot. And Krystal, clearly the Democrats, they know they screwed up now at this point. The National Democratic Party is silent, but they're looking at this, and it is a total 2016 replay. I really think Trump, I tweeted this earlier today, Trump's power levels are higher than I've seen him in years. He hasn't been talking about Stop the Steal. On Twitter, he's honestly pretty funny. Or Truth, sorry. Meatball Ron is fantastic. I'm sorry. It's just the best, one of the best nicknames I've heard in a long time.
He says that's fake news, Saagar. Yeah. He would never call Meatball Ron Meatball Ron.
He's going to say, you're right, exactly. I'd never call Meatball Ron. Just devastating and publicly, looking at Nikki Haley and just brushing her aside, just, almost smirking at her candidacy. And then the political genius of just swaltzing into East Palestine while Biden is in Ohio.
Banned?
The Trump water and making the joke about all of that. That is vintage 2000. He seems more unshackled right now than ever. Now, look, Trump is always his own worst enemy. He hasn't been talking about Stop the Steal all that much lately. If it does get indicted in Georgia, clearly, that's going to come back to the fore. So he's one of those where he has immense political talent and immense political baggage. Right now, you're seeing the talent aspect, I think. And if he continues, it's only going to work out even better.
Yeah, and no talk about abortion from him.
No, not one word about it. He's not a stupid man. You can always say that.
The last thing I want to point out, which I raised yesterday, go ahead and put this up on the screen. I think we had covered before how Libby, Montana has Medicare for all because of this provision that got put into Obamacare, where if you have an area that's deemed a public health disaster, and that town had been poisoned basically because of the result of a mining operation there. But you can, if you're deemed a public health disaster, you can actually invoke this provision of Obamacare to get Medicare for life. Now, listen, in my opinion, everybody deserves Medicare for all, but at the very least, these residents who we know were exposed to a known carcinogen deserve to have health care coverage for themselves and for their children for life. Because after the TV cameras go away, and after the immediate symptoms and the smell of chemical contaminants, after that all fades, it's years down the road when we will really know the true health impacts of what ultimately happened here.
Christ.
And to lend myself some credibility, David Dayen sort of seconded the idea, because he's the one who flagged for me originally, back previously, that Libby, Montana had this ability and that this was something that the Biden administration could potentially use. And he said he was warming to the idea. It requires a public health emergency declaration. EPA has already said to Norfolk Southern that the situation fits under CERCLA. I don't know what that is. HHS would then have to create a specific pilot program for East Palestine based on potential exposure. So, and he goes on to add, 5,000 new people on the Medicare rolls is a rounding error. Government would have to admit the potential for harm from chemical exposure, though, which would seem to be the main hurdle, as nobody really wants to say that right now. So that's the barrier, is they don't want to admit that there was potentially damaging long-term chemical exposure here that could make them eligible for this provision.
And when they admit it, they have to admit their own role in not going and trying to fix it as soon as possible.
That's right.
So these people,
except they were on the ground 3 hours later, but
they've been screwed from day one. We're not going to let this go, and we just can't. It's unfortunate that the Biden administration, really the media, have left this open for Republicans and for independent journalism, but we're going to take it because, you can't just forget these people. It's just really not right.
That's absolutely right. And to that point, we have been partnering with Status Quo on the ground. They have a journalist there who has been talking to residents over days, if not weeks at this point, talking to them about their symptoms and doing some digging in particular into those water tests. So let's get right to it. Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this